So excited to be here at DevWeek. It's always been such a great, awesome conference. And I'm also even more excited that even with everything that's going on, we have an opportunity to be here and have a chance to listen to speakers as well as do a lot of networking. So super psyched. Before we kick off, I wanted to talk to everybody about a topic that's pretty close to my heart and I have learned over the last few years. The topic is you are growing, but are you really scaling? Before we get into the topic, I just wanted to paint a little bit of a context about me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about me. We will go through what are we going to pick today and what are the key takeaways at the end of our presentation, and I'll try to leave a few minutes for you all to ask me questions if you do. As you see, yes, I've actually been here in New York, and I have been based here in New York for the most part of my adult life. I started my career in electronic trading, which was emphasized by low latency, high performance trading. It was really building algorithms to trade better, faster, and make a profit. And I'm really very thankful that I was exposed to an area where tech completely revolutionized how things would work forever. Just after that, I had an opportunity to work for one of the biggest banks in their digital banking group. I partnered with product teams to roll out a mobile banking app that was meant to lure Gen Zs with zero fees, fun emojis, and help them manage their investments and create wealth. This was one of those few times where I could actually explain my job to my mom and she would get it. Currently, I am responsible for Uber's reliability platform and the observability org. I support teams that build Uber's tracing, monitoring, alerting, and all the observability related products. These products are used by every engineer at Uber to develop, scale, understand, and monitor their systems in a very, very complicated environment with 4,000 microservices, hundreds of thousands of CPU cores, and multiple DCs, clouds, and hundreds of thousands of concurrent trips around the world. Just a little bit about me outside of work. I believe in early math and engineering education, and I partner with high school students to participate in robotic competition. I identify myself as a creative spirit. I am a Lego hoarder. I am an engineer, and I'm also a mom to my 2 kids. So you would realize that I might have a few things to tell about scaling. So let's start jumping right in. So I wanted all of you to leave with these 3 takeaways, which is what's the difference between a growth mindset and really scaling? How do you scale yourself to work on bigger and bigger products? And how do you scale your teams to increase their output? When I started growing in the leadership space, I wish someone had told me about what it means to really scale. So to tell you all a story, I was responsible for building out Chase's mobile app and build out all the alerting platform that all our consumers will use. While doing that, I was responsible for building teams around the globe. I assumed that scaling teams is akin to replicating teams around the globe and just duplicating the process that you do locally everywhere else. But that's when I learned that it isn't that easy. Hence today, I wanted to share with you 5 strategies that worked for me, and I hope that gives you some food for thought. I will be sharing the following takeaways that I just read out. We will learn how you and your team can not just grow, but grow exponentially. So the key difference with growth and scale is that scale is achieved by increasing revenues without incurring significant costs. Now let's begin with the most common distinction between these 2 terms. In general, we think of growth in linear terms. A company or a team, you add new resources and the revenue increases as a result. This model constantly occurs in a professional services environment. You gain a client, you hire more people to service the client, you add revenue, and at the exact same rate at which you would have added more costs. While you have technically grown, you actually haven't scaled. By contrast, scaling is when revenue increases without a substantial increase in resources. For example, if I send an email to 10 people or to 1 million, my effort is exactly the same, which is why enterprises use email marketing so heavily. It just scales so well. The biggest problem in growth is that it takes a lot of resources to sustain constant growth. Take for another example of an advertising agency. Let's say that it has currently 5 clients, but which is about to take on 5 more clients. Increasing the number of companies it sells will bring in more money, but chances are it won't be able to do that without hiring more people. Because of the cost associated with growth, CEOs and leaders have kind of become obsessed with the idea of scaling. Again, let's just remember that scaling is achieved by increasing revenue without incurring significant costs. This could be scaling of your team, scaling yourself, scaling your product, scaling your platforms. An example of a company I would like to say that also figured out how to scale is just where I work right now, Uber, which in recent years have multiple unique products in the transportation space with over 10 billion rides while employing only 3,500 engineers globally. I also wanted to call folks out to the fact that scaling is not luck, it's really a decision that you take. When your team is growing, you and your business is growing, you are increasing revenue and you are increasing the size of the number of folks that actually come together in your organization. The internal reality, though, is with growth, that stress levels and the drama of the daily operations that your teams have to go through goes through the roof. All this leads to lesser and lesser time spent with your family and things that really matter. Scaling is a whole other story. When you're scaling, your revenue and your output and your team's output is growing at a much faster rate than your expenses. You have the opportunity to hire the right team, the right set of people, invest in the tools and resources you couldn't afford before, and really reduce the operating drama. When you are scaling, I truly believe that you can have your life back. I do also feel that scaling the unscalable is really where the action is. That's really where the creativity of being a great leader comes in. So let's split this session into two pieces. One is how do you scale yourself, and the other piece is how do you scale your teams? So scaling yourself, if you think about it, is how can you replicate yourself in so many different shapes and forms so that you can maximize your output? I wanted to talk about 5 strategies that you could use to scale yourself today. A, build a strong foundation, connect the dots, ace communication, learn constantly, and really find balance. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive in each of those areas, and let's talk about some tips and tricks that I've tried using in the past and I've been successful. And maybe also tips and tricks that I've used wherein I wasn't successful. So scaling yourself and building a strong foundation. It really means being open to learning. Whenever you are responsible for a larger process, a larger team, a larger product, be very open to learning. Try digging as much deep as possible, but also understand that you need to go broad. You always ask the 5 whys. I've learned that along the way, asking the 5 whys have always helped me dig deep. What I have here is a framework that I use personally for my own learning. Every time I am responsible for a product or supporting multiple teams, I start filling up this framework just for myself. Who are all my users and who am I creating the value and the impact for? Who are all the important people on the team that are responsible for really creating that value? What kind of a tech stack do we have? What kind of tech products are we using? Are these legacy products? Are these newer products? And finally, the most important is really the risk, which is where are the blind spots? Just knowing your blind spots upfront helps you understand bringing in the right support that you need to get over the blind spots. The next step in really scaling yourself is connecting the dots. I kind of see this as a 3-part process. Great leaders are very aware. They're very aware of their industry. They're very aware of their products. They're aware of their teams, their leaders on their teams, and just themselves. They spend all the energy to position teams on their strong points. And when it comes to themselves, they're always in the moment. They have the ability to be mindful and be a spectator of their own thoughts. Another key value when it comes to connecting the dots is synthesis. When you are in a position with so much information and being aware, with awareness comes a lot of information. So how do you really synthesize this information? So how do you learn to separate signal from noise and try to chart out what you are trying to accomplish and how to use this information in an effective manner? And finally, I feel inspiration, just your inspiration and self-motivation, as well as motivation and inspiration for the team. Taking all the awareness, the synthesis, and scaling this, compelling your leaders to take action, Setting a clear goal and giving the clarity for your teams, as just for also for your own personal self, absolutely helps your thought process. And finally, the most important piece in connecting the dots is to become customer obsessed. I wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to ace communication when you're scaling yourself. As you expose yourself to many situations, you kind of start understanding your audience. So I came up with like 5 to 6 key things that you would remember when you want to ace communication. A, understand your audience. It could be either multiple teams, it could be external teams, it could be vendors, it could be partners, it could be leadership, it could be all your C-level positions, and you change the way you communicate and just understand your audience. Always remember to understand what would they want to derive out of the conversation. Another way to be effective is to really just keep it real. Your teams can spend a large amount of time parsing every word that you said to separate fact from spin. Half-truth breeds distrust, and anxiety. In good times and bad, honesty builds trust. Especially in a bad time, it is actually okay to say that you don't know and move forward. Please be authentic. People see very fast that you are not authentic when you communicate. So please bring yourself, be it at work. And please bring your full self at work. We have ears and we really should use them. Communication is a two-way street, and what we hear is often more important than what we say. When someone else is speaking, great communicators aren't thinking ahead and planning what will they say next. Instead, they're actively listening and they're fully focused. And finally, be very proactive. Don't wait until the shit hits the fan. Just be proactive, get on top of it, communicate, and always ask for feedback. You would be surprised that feedback kind of comes from every single way, and the best gift that you could receive is feedback. I also put together a quick cheat sheet on how I ace communication, or try to ace communication. So if you have something that's important and urgent, do it right now. Try to get at it at the moment, right now. If it is important but it's not urgent, you could plan for it. Have milestones, have some kind of a timeline, but plan for it. If you have something that's urgent but not that important and can, then try delegating it. That would be a great way to build your leaders on your team. If there's something that's not urgent and not important, eliminate. I do spend a lot of my time upfront to eliminate things that are not important and not urgent, and that could be just either automated or just no longer is relevant to running the business, as well as running yourself. The next thing that I wanted, the fourth point that I want to talk to you guys about scaling yourself is really learning constantly. Good leaders continuously update their skills. They keep learning. Unfortunately, sometimes learning as a leader can be more difficult than in other roles. In years past, our jobs may have been super technical. However, as you start becoming a leader for a large org, for a large team, the skills that you use every day begin to change. So to keep learning as a leader means being vulnerable and being brave and going into uncharted territory. There is no question that is a foolish or a stupid question. Leadership and team management skills are often very different from what a leader built their career doing. As such, it's easy to get out of touch with what's happening in the industry. So learning as a leader is challenging because you still need to understand your particular domain to a certain degree. However, you no longer directly apply the technical skills. However, you need to get your head out of the nitty-gritty and be able to think strategically. So I had a couple different tips that I think of, and strategies to keep learning. So keep learning by reading books, blogs, and research publications. If reading books is not that easy, Audible is a great way. Subscribe to news blogs. Subscribe to updates that you could hear when you are commuting. And clearly, we're not commuting right now. And have a sense of research publications. Another great way is you don't need to know all the answers, and sometimes you also don't need to know the resources as to where to learn the answers. You could just learn from consultants. You could bring on new consultants from outside where you could do a deep dive in understanding how things work. Keep learning from your personal network. Keeping in touch with friends or former colleagues can be a great way to keep learning. If they're off working somewhere, they will be learning their own lessons. You can benefit from these lessons, provided you make the effort. Keep learning from external industry events, like for example, today. Bring external speakers to talk to your teams so that it's not just you learning, but it is a combined learning on the team. Keep learning by working at different organizations. One of the simplest and the most powerful sources of learning is simply to just work at different organizations. You quickly learn the culture, you learn the way things are being done, you quickly learn new skills that you wouldn't have in your previous role. Leaders who spend most of their time with a single organization tend to become accustomed to the status quo. So working in other environments exposes you to new ideas, new people, and new organizational models. But if you are somebody who's worked on the same organization for a long time, and you are actually happy in that role, happy in the organization, just ensure that you challenge yourself with taking on new roles within the same organization. And finally, scaling yourself and finding the balance. I would just say, finding the balance is probably the most key thing, and scaling it would actually get you to find your balance. Lead by example. Please do not send a non-urgent email at 2 a.m. just because you were up. Try to have a balanced schedule. I would also say, please do not reward workaholics. It kind of sends a wrong message. Encourage vacation time and just take vacations. Try to stay away from sending emails when you are on vacation. Formulate a great work-life integration. For example, I just have a single to-do that talks about all my work as well as all the tasks that I need to do on my home front. It's just one big list, and every time I complete one, it gets just popped out of the stack. Offer workplace flexibility. Corona actually, obviously, COVID-19 has been a great equalizer of how it will change our workspace. And a lot of people have started understanding that work from home is still not, work from home is not a bad thing after all. But then provide flexibility, understand that people and teams are in different situations, and also just be flexible, also just offer that flexibility for yourself. You don't have to bend over in most situations. Now I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what it takes to scaling your team. And I came up with 5 strategies that I've used personally in the past. One is setting a solid vision. Second is setting good goals, embracing failure, and doing course correction. Third is just encouraging self-organization and autonomy on the teams. Fourth is distributing responsibility. And then fifth is just staying close to the hiring process. And let's just do a little bit of a deep dive. So setting a solid vision. I just wanted to kind of share Uber's growth flywheel today. If you see the flywheel, it's very simple. This was actually written on a paper napkin, right? More demands means more drivers, which basically means more geographic channels, which also means that you're going to have more people, more supply, and then the demand and the supply keeps kind of fueling each other. So long-term success in scaling a team requires a alignment between what employees value and what the organization values. So without this alignment, you'll have a hard time finding and keeping engineers and employees on your teams, or even expanding teams. Scaling a team isn't one size fits all process. This is what I learned very quickly, very fast. With just 5 or 10 people, it's very easy to develop common understandings just by sitting around a table all day together. But when it starts becoming a 40 to 50 to 100 to a 200 or even more in a larger team organization, one worth committing to is some form of writing. Without a common set of values for how we approach, let's say engineering, for example, I would see that we would end with big disparities between the teams. Some would be following a more effective process and others less so. Some would be fostering a culture that they think is right, and others would be something different. So I kind of think of this in 4 steps. One is brainstorm. Ideas are hard to generate in a vacuum. People need to get together and have ideas of what they think is the culture that they want to shape on their organization, which has to be in line with the culture of the overall company. Collate. If people have some similar ideas, that's a good sign. We had a lot around learning. For example, keep getting better at your craft, or let's say we'll always be learning, right? These are some phrases that engineers on my team came up with. So the first one was brainstorm. The second is collate. The third is just workshop. In cohorts of 15 to 20, we voted on the values that we wanted to comply. We wrote it on a whiteboard, and everybody had to come and give a vote, and we had tally marks. And then finally, the voting, right, which is the basic acceptance criteria for a value, whether it resonates with the team. We chose a final set of values using a simple Google form, and we just said, yes, this is what we want to stick with, and we called it our team conventions and move forward. This is a very interesting and a very important thing that you could do to scale your teams, which is have and ensure that they can self-organize and give them the autonomy. The degree, the direction, and the intensity of self-organization can be influenced and fostered by really manipulating these two crucial ingredients: setting a good goal and setting boundaries. Self-organized teams are able to evolve and adapt quickly in today's really complex world. At the same time, self-organized teams are also more robust to external disturbances. A good goal motivates and gives context about the purpose and the reasons as to what the team is trying to achieve. The moment you have a good goal, you will see that engineers and people on the team will just start self-organizing dependent upon the skills that they have. A good goal also helps to remain on track in case a distraction occurs. Besides goals, teams need boundaries to self-organize. Teams without boundaries lack alignment and suffer far too many possibilities. This was a great chart for me to see about how to take a good decision making. There are 5 different things that you need to make good decisions. One is real-time information. The second is multiple simultaneous alternatives. Have a counselor, have a 2-tier advisor process, have a consensus with qualification, and have a decision integration. And finally, I would say staying very close to the hiring process is very key. Centralize the hiring decision, have a very structured but flexible recruitment process, empower for exceptions, have a clear bar raiser, have diversity and inclusion training for mindful and empathy leaders. And finally, I feel like as leaders, we have a 3-part process, 3-part responsibility for our teams. We act as coaches, we help facilitate, but then we also steer when things go wrong. So in summary, figure out what needs to be done and only do the important work to scale yourself. Find your work-life balance so you can keep scaling. Your work-life balance could be different than somebody else's work-life balance. Set bold goals that push you to learn, fail, and succeed fast for your teams. And finally, communicate and delegate responsibility to your team very effectively. Build the trust. So that's all I have, and thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions if you guys have any. Okay. We have yes. So William asked me, can I have a link for the slide deck? Yes, absolutely. I will share. Will this recording be posted? I guess it will be. What kind of boundaries are you thinking? Sorry. So great question on the boundaries. Having a sense of, the boundaries could be either driven by responsibility, could be driven by the skill set of the people, could be sometimes also be by the location and geographical boundaries. So for example, my current teams are spread all over Europe, in San Francisco and Palo Alto, in New York, and really, defining the boundaries kind of happens happens organically because of the geographic boundaries, but also because of the skill sets. Was working from home an early policy to improve recruitment? From Simon. Working from home an early policy to improve recruitment. I do not understand the question. Do you mean working from home helps us improve recruitment, or do you feel, I actually do not understand the question. So I think I'm happy to take the question. I am on LinkedIn, so I am happy to answer them. I did not understand the question clearly, Simon. Okay. Are there any other scaling tools like email marketing that you mentioned before? Yeah, that's a great question. So there are multiple scaling tools. Email marketing is a great one. There are ones where multiple folks can actually come together and do design reviews that we actually use on our teams, which is a great one. In terms of
alert from updates not installed.
Okay. In terms of other tools, we also use a centralized tools for testing that actually scales very well. So there are multiple areas and multiple tools. Again, happy to talk about them if you get me on LinkedIn. Any other question? Absolutely. The people part is sorely underappreciated in many orgs. Absolutely agree, Anuj. I really feel like if we do not invest in our team and in our people, I don't understand how the organization can actually grow and scale. With this pandemic and mostly everyone working from home, does any of this change or improve? Oh, great question, Tanya. I do think, there are some things that actually happen better. I think communication has just become even more harder because you do have to ensure that you're reaching out to your team and constantly talking to them, which was much more easier before because you could just meet them for coffee, meet them on the hallway. What has actually happened better in some cases is actually working from home and the work-life balance. If you are able to set clear boundaries, you are actually able to enjoy working from home, saving on the commute. And for people who are parents with kids, it actually gives them a better time to also spend time with their family. In terms of recruiting, it has actually become harder because, but then it has become a great equalizer. Now you no longer have to find engineers from the same geographical boundaries. Now you have the ability to be able to talk to engineers just spread around from any and everywhere. So I feel like the pandemic has become a great equalizer in terms of finding great talent. How to manage time in work from home when it becomes 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Great question, Gurdeep. I would actually say that, being very open and explicit about what kind of a timeline that you want would be great. One tip that I do is I just make my calendar public at work. So anybody and everybody can actually see how my calendar looks like. I block times in the afternoon saying that it's going to be lunchtime. I block time in the evening for 45 minutes saying that I'm going to spend that time with my kids. We're either going to go to a park, obviously socially distancing. So being just explicit and open about it and talking about it with your colleagues to say that this is how you'd want to do your work, this is how you want to balance your work life, that greatly helps. Once you start doing it, people who have not been very open would start sharing about their work life. And it becomes very quickly, it catches on the teams. Okay. I'm just trying to scroll up and see if I have any other questions. Primarily, I do see a lot of requests for the slide deck. Absolutely, will pass it on. Rick, I don't know if there's an easy way to do it. This is on my Google Slides, and I'll just make it public so folks can get it. Awesome. Great. Awesome. So top 3 things that you would suggest specifically for career development. Yeah, sure. So top 3 things in terms of career development is really being open. Be open to explore. The biggest thing that I do worry or I see a lot is kind of having a presumption on how a job or a role would be. So I would really say just be open to new opportunities and be open to explore things that you think that you don't have skill sets for. That's when you really start growing. So being open, being vulnerable, and putting yourself out there to get more, to just open yourself to new roles would be great. And third is just constant learning. I mean, either if it is listening to YouTube videos or blogs or books, I would say that constant learning is great. I think there was a question on what's my favorite book. One thing that I am actually reading right now is The Design of Simple Everyday Things. I love that book because it just talks about simplicity and also having the ability to invent in a very, and in a simplified way. So please look it up. It's awesome. I really love that book. Raju asked me, how's your day like as an engineering manager? Great question, Raju. So I kind of split my day into 4 parts as an engineering manager. I would say one is setting the vision for the org, as well as for the team to be ensuring that it is in sync with the overall company's goals. The second is really ensuring that I unblock all my engineers in setting up a lightweight process for them so that they could execute at a fast pace. The third step is a lot of my time goes in team management and people management. Am I ensuring that I have all my engineers aligned in the right direction that actually helps them challenges them in their careers? Am I challenging my senior engineers really well? Am I coaching my managers in my organization? So a lot of my third bucket, I would say, is a coaching and team management. And the fourth is a lot of it is also recruiting and ensuring that we are hiring the right talent along the way. And then I would say, understanding what we are building and picking the right solution is also another area that I spend a lot of my time and energy into. Great. There you go. Thank you, Gregory. Looks like you got the design of everyday things. Yes, that's the one that I am reading. Alex asks me, what are your tips for someone who's currently a software engineer and looking into a management role? Okay, great question, Alex. I get that all the time. And I actually had an engineer on my team now very recently transition to a management role. The one thing that I would say for an engineer trying to transition into a management role is actually, I would kind of break it down into a couple pieces. One is, engineering and a management role is completely two new roles. They have some similarities, but they absolutely are two different roles, and you need to have different skill set, but they are buildable. They are skill sets that you can pick along the way, right? So that's one. Second is, do you actually feel like, do you want to be in a space where a lot of the work that you do as a leader, not a manager, but a leader, is really influencing the engineers on the team? Are you one where you feel like you can sit back, give the control to your engineers, and would you be able to actually help influence the decision making? Right. And the third thing is, as a manager or as a leader, are you actually able to put your team's your team's concerns or your team's growth? It has to be before your own growth and your own aspirations. And finally, as a manager, you would now start being responsible for other people's careers. So do you want to be in a situation, and do you enjoy being in a situation where you are responsible for other engineers and other team members' career? So I would say, like, if it is a consistent yes around all of those, then I feel like now you are ready to kind of transition into a management role. I would say that you should actually find teams or opportunities where you have a few people who, and a small team that you would be responsible for, and you start getting a taste of whether you really like it or not. Do you have any advice for beginning engineers that have to start their careers from home instead of on-site at the office? Great question, Tanya. It's happening a lot these days. I would kind of break this into two parts. One is, do I have any advice for beginning engineers? I would say for beginning engineers, the one big thing I would say is be open to anything that gets thrown to you. Never say no. If there is a tough project, there's a new thing that you absolutely have never had a chance to work for, but you have an opportunity to do it, please grab it with two arms. Second, I would say is, always, if there is an opportunity, please raise your hand as much as you can, because that would help you do one that, the first thing that I told you, which is expose yourself to multiple opportunities. And then just in terms of, working from home, understand that, working from home is new to everybody. So over communicating is great, either be it on Slack or internal messenger or emails, writing asynchronous documents that you can share out with your team. I think those would be great ideas just to be, get your word out. And also realize that, when you are working from home, you are kind of in your home space where you're not completely cut out from everything that's happening in home. So somebody might have had a bad day at home and they might be reflecting it on a meeting. So please do not take it personally. I would just say, those are some of the tips, some of the advices that I can think on the top of my head. Great. No problem. Awesome. I guess we might be at the end of the questions. Like I said, I am on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to also share this deck. I will work with Rick to ensure that he can actually, send this out to all of you. And I wish you all the best, and hang in there and stay safe. Okay, great. Take care, guys. Thank you.